We definitely spend a lot of time watching movies that aren't related to climbing, or
Good for you.
like we do typical couple stuff. We love going to see every superhero movie,
Hey,
honestly.
good for you, fellow geek.
Yeah.
I love to hear it. Welcome back, friends, to the Dave Crenshaw Success Project. In this episode, part 2 of 2, I continue my interview with Ben Mayforth. He's a remarkable world-class paraclimber who's sponsored by North Face. And I just got so much out of this interview, I wanted to make sure you heard the whole thing. Now, remember, as you're listening to this episode, look for an action. Look for one thing you can do to make Ben Mayforth's success story a part of your success story. We now continue with part 2. Enjoy. You mentioned something previously that I want to go back to.
Yeah.
Mental health is really, really important to me. You're probably not aware of this, but every year I post up a video where I talk about how I went through a really intense period where I was suicidal almost continually and what I did to get out of it and how I managed it, which for me, briefly, is just viewing my brain as an organ, just like my heart.
Mm-hmm.
And there are certain things I would do to prevent issues with my heart, and I need to do the same things. I need a doctor, I need a therapist, and I might need emergency medication, that kind of thing. So you mentioned bipolar, and I'm glad you brought this up because this is something that I deal with. For those who are unfamiliar, how does that bipolar disorder manifest in your life? What impact does it have? What's it like?
So I'm bipolar B, so I'm more depressive than manic.
Okay.
So most of the time I have a lower demeanor when the depression kicks in. And it can be very, very hard to get up and get moving. It also has a lot of ideation involved with it.
Ideation of what?
Suicidal ideation.
Okay.
A lot of just taking every negative that comes forward and amplifying it. And that's a really hard thing to try and deal with when you're trying to physically climb through gravity, when your body's already feeling very heavy.
Wow, that's such an interesting way
Yeah.
to put it.
Just
You're
days-
climbing up at the same time that your body, from the psychological standpoint, is pushing you
is
down.
trying to keep you down and
Mm.
laid down. And so when I'm like going through that day to day, I'm like trying to manifest different positives and manifest a routine in my morning to kind of make sure that I'm taking every step.
So when you say it manifests that way, like the routine has some positives to it, so you can look at it and say those are positives
Yes.
that are helping you?
Yeah. And so, like, for example, I only make French presses in the morning. I try and make sure that I wake up with enough time to get up, make a French press, take my medication with some food, and actually take a little bit of time. And using that routine as like a baseline.
Mm.
That routine's your baseline. Every day you're going to do the same thing in a very similar way. I take a shower in the morning, just about every morning. Usually turn on the cold the last minute of my shower to kind of put some resilience into me and to give the body a little bit of a shock.
Yes. Can I talk
Yeah.
about that for just a second?
Yeah.
Because that's something that I learned I needed to do. When the brain starts to get hyperactive and overactive about what's negative and what's wrong and beating you up like that, that's something that I learned. My therapist taught me was to do something to shock the system because it takes the brain away from all this negative and goes, what is this?
Yes.
Right? So you take that cold shower and the brain immediately stops feeling bad about yourself and says, this is not pleasant. It is
Yeah.
not hurting you. You're not abusing yourself, but you're just saying, pay attention to this for a moment and realize that you can survive it and that you don't have to think about these other things.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what I do in the morning to try and shock the system. That way I'm alive, I'm awake, I'm ready to go to work or ready to tackle the day.
Yeah.
I make sure I have a list of things I need to do that specific day. And I slowly start crossing off the tasks in my list. And I try and give them times. So like, this should only take me about 30 minutes. This should only take me about 15 minutes. And if I'm exceeding that time too much, I kind of break it down and was like, okay, I'll return to this later. This needs more time. And so I'll find a good stopping point pause it, and then return to it later in the next morning or the next day.
How do you keep track of that? It seems like a lot of different parts that you're wrangling in your head.
It is. I have a slight task manager on my notebook
Okay.
that I use. So writing things down and giving a few lines of space of like if I had to stop and go do something else, where I left off and what I need to finish. So making sure I'm writing the notes of like if I'm writing a training program and I had some sort of emergency pop up or had to go to work early. Writing had to go to work early, left on week 4, day 5, finish day 6,
Yeah.
and week 5 and 6
Okay.
type of deal.
But all of this is part of managing your mental health.
Yes.
Yeah.
All of it's managing because the more tasks that I do and the more positive things that I put forth in my life, so the more I'm investing in my life and doing the basic stuff and making sure that I'm taking care of myself in a holistic manner, not just the mental side, not just the physical side, but also taking care of myself in the economic side, the task management side, that work side that
Yeah.
everyone has to do. Because sometimes if you focus too much on the mental aspect or the physical aspect, those other physical parts get left undone.
And I would add to that too, sometimes your brain just isn't right. And when you're trying to figure things out, when your brain isn't right, when it's not functioning properly, you're not going to figure anything out
Yeah.
anyway. Like, why am I depressed? Why am I feeling manic? The answer is because you're not well
Yeah.
in this moment. So stop trying to figure that out. Go do something else, productive or even distracting. And then you can come back to this
Come back.
later when
Yes.
you're more grounded
Yeah.
and start trying to figure these things out.
And I've had that instance. I've talked with therapists before, and they're like, do you think you need to go into an institution? I was like, and put a pause on the rest of my life and the things that cause me anxiety more.
Yeah.
I was like, I need to take care of a couple of different tasks first, and then I'm going to return back to here. And that's just the reality of how you have to like build a baseline is like sometimes you have to take care of the simple things like doing the laundry, taking care of bills.
Don't underestimate the power of doing something easy.
Yes, exactly.
Sometimes when I talk to people, they're like, I'm overwhelmed. In fact, I just had this conversation with a family member and they were overwhelmed with everything. They couldn't figure out the priority. I said, stop trying to think about the priority. What's easy? Do that. And then what's the next easy thing? Do that. And what happens is you start to compound all of
And you
these
get
successes.
all this momentum.
Right. And then
Yeah.
the hard stuff will happen because now you've built up.
A good base.
Yes, exactly.
And that baseline is pretty consistent.
Yeah.
And so I try and tackle that baseline pretty regularly. I try and take 2 mornings of my week where I'm doing the chores that I need to do around the house. It's been a little off recently because I'm in the process of moving. My lease is up, so I'm moving to a new spot. So I'm trying to figure that out a little bit. Like even this morning, I woke up early to take some things over to my new place and then came over here to do the interview. So it's trying to figure out what is important and what is easy. And usually I go with the easy thing to start off with because I'm like, oh, I can reply to like these 4 emails and communicate with the people I need to communicate with and make a good baseline for the rest of the day.
Yeah. If I'm going to summarize everything that you've said, and we kind of mentioned this before, but it is control. It's easy to feel like you don't have control when you're dealing with mental health struggles.
Yeah.
It's easy to feel like the brain is controlling you. And doing all these things says, no, I am in charge. I am not going to let this feeling or this thought dictate everything about my life.
Yeah.
I can do something. The thing that I can do, I'm going to do. And that just alone shows I'm in charge here. And I think those little steps are so important for anyone who's dealing with whatever mental health challenge that you have.
Yeah. And I think it's super crucial. And the cold shower in the morning, that's completely to shock the system and to prepare you for the unexpected. So That's the other thing. It's like I found that when I was building so much of a baseline, that when something that was a curveball was thrown my way, it would just ruin my whole entire day.
Mm,
And that's not a way to live. That's not a good
no.
problem solving aspect. And I was like, okay, what is something that I can do to prepare myself for the unexpected and the unknown and take control of that? And so that shocking the system with the cold shower in the morning became my ritual for that preparation.
Yeah, and I want to add one thing in here too. And maybe this is something you do or maybe not, but you just said something that's so important. Practice your response.
Yes.
You practice over and over. When I'm on this hold, then my next response is to go up to this hold, or my next response is to take a break for a second before I move on, right? But what about practicing for the mental health challenges? And I've done this. My therapist helped me with this. He actually has me imagine, this is cognitive behavioral therapy, imagine that someone did something that was highly disruptive in your day. Imagine that you just got bad news about your career. What would you do? What are the feelings that you go through? In my case, it's what I do is I go through the grieving process, the steps of grief, anger, right? Frustration, bargaining. And I actually allow my mind to practice that because you can't skip it, but you can control how fast you go through it so that I get used to acceptance. And by practicing that over and over, when those things happen, I'm prepared. And it sounds like, in a way, that's what you're doing.
Yeah. That is how I kind of prepare for those circumstances. And I've had so many weird circumstances happen and so many unknowns that I've had to take a step back and realize that I do need to prepare, and I do try and mourn those things before they happen. That way I can process that
I love
in
that
a
word.
quicker manner.
I love the word mourn
Yeah.
in that.
There's a process, for example, like I've gone through what my retirement would look like from competition. I'm watching a fellow friend right now battle with it, and continuously she keeps saying it's going to be her last year.
Mm.
And she's been saying that for a while. And this will be her 10th competitive year. And she's like, yeah, I'm going to retire this year. And I'm like, are you? And she's like, yeah, I think I'm done. And I was like, ooh, how do I get to the point where I know I'm ready to retire? And
Someday it's going to happen.
Yeah.
There's a shelf life to being an athlete, isn't there?
Yes, there is. Luckily for climbing's a lifelong sport. You're not going to be able to competitively climb for a long time, but you can change those skills. So what I've done is started taking in other climbing skills, like learning how to become a actual guide, a single pitch guide, and learning those skills. That way I can continue my career later and
When you're not competing.
when I'm not competing.
Yes.
I've opened up a coaching business so I can take what I've learned over the years of competing so I can coach other athletes to get through that process.
That's so smart.
Yeah.
The long-term preparation and the awareness of that is really smart because you do not want to be surprised.
Yeah.
When that time comes.
And you don't want to be unprepared. And every step I've been taking over the last few years has been in preparation to make climbing and this lifestyle a lifelong pursuit. It just takes time. You got to build off skills. You got to keep consistent. So making sure that you have that baseline and then always pursuing more information has been kind of the big thing. I was like, okay, I'm learning these skills. How can I build off of this skill type of deal?
Sure.
And that, especially with hard skills and coaching skills, I'm always constantly reading or looking into new techniques for rope management or looking in even accidents that happen on the mountain and say, how can we learn from these aspects? How can we learn from these failures that other people have had and apply new things to our life? So it's a consistency of wanting to go and pursue more knowledge.
Yeah. I like that you're continually learning, continually grabbing new knowledge, not just being content with what you've done. Talk to me a little bit about the North Face sponsorship. How did that come about and what has that meant to your career?
Yeah, so my friend Mo, she asked me to apply for the North Face Athlete Development Program. They have an athlete development program, and she asked me to do that in 2022. So I wrote out this big, long application. They bring on, I think, 10 athletes a year to kind of like learn how to be a developed athlete. I was like, okay, I filled it out. I made it through the first round and I got a second round interview. During my second round interview, I had just finished the World Cup in Innsbruck, which was my first gold in an IFSC event.
Okay.
And I did this interview and they looked at my rap sheet, 2 silvers in world championships and numerous medals in USAC events, active outdoor climber. And they looked at my actual physical goals to hit certain grades and be the first paraclimber in my category and first paraclimber in general to hit some of these grades. And they really liked that. And then I heard silence. Like the ADP program had been chosen. I hadn't heard back from anyone. I reached out and they were like, we're not going to offer you the athlete development program. We're actually going to offer you something else. Just give us a little while. And all these conversations were happening. And eventually I got an email back and they're like, hey, Ben, we're actually going to bring you on the team. We just need some time to deal with the legal stuff and see how much we're going to offer. We're going to give you a standard first year contract and see how that works. At this point, I was in a high of my career with getting 2 back-to-back golds, but also I had some work issues. I wasn't working as much in my day job and didn't have as many hours and was generally struggling to try and make it. But in my climbing career, I was getting all these opportunities to go to festivals, to rep booths, to have opportunities to teach. And the North Face and a few of my other sponsors helped pay for these events and paid me for them after winning 2 golds. It was definitely a big help. And then I got my contract and they gave me a travel budget and a gear budget. And that just helped me immensely. I was really struggling to figure out how to pay for all the competitions. Like I was reaching out for grants. I was doing different nonprofit organizations and reaching out for them to help pay for certain aspects of the season just so I could make it. And when I got on the North Face, it was just like all that hard work and everything was finally being recognized. And it's a big deal. It's a huge deal. I put every blood, sweat, and tears into it, even almost quitting climbing a couple of times just because like all the stress and pressure was getting too much.
Yeah.
And finally, when I had somebody that I knew had my back, I was astounded, at least the financial backing.
Yeah. That's great.
And it was huge. And I remember when our athlete budget came and I was on the website, I was like, I don't want to go over my budget and everything. And my fiance is like, what are the things you really wanted from the North Face when growing up looking at them? Because they have some key iconic pieces of clothing and gear. And I was like, okay, you're right. I should go for what I have always wanted because I finally have the opportunity to. And I did. And they really helped me propel my career. I've done so many speaking engagements for them recently. I've went and done festivals with them. And they've given me ample opportunities to go out and do teaching clinics, which like is one of my big passions. I love giving back to my community and love giving back to the people that have impacted my life and giving back to the adaptive community and giving back to other people and talking about my whole entire experience of why paraclimbing changed my life for the positive has just been one of the coolest things. And I've gotten to go all over the world just to go and represent USA and the North Face.
That's fantastic, Ben. That's great. Your fiance has been a topic. She's brought up a lot and the influence that she's had on you. The challenge that sometimes people have when they're married or they have a girlfriend or a relationship that does the same thing they do is you have a hard time not always talking about that thing. and it's sometimes tough to build a relationship outside of work. What do you two do to make sure that you have other things that you talk about and other things that you do so that you have more balance in your life?
She's ADHD, so her focus can be very hyper focused
Okay.
or very all over the place. So
Okay.
she has a lot of different interests that we're able to connect on and work on together. We just try and spend time together outside of climbing, like still inside the mountains and inside of the outdoor industry. But she has me explore different aspects of the outdoors that I don't typically
Like,
experience. Hiking.
okay.
I'm not a big hiker for obvious reasons,
Yeah.
but I do enjoy it. I do enjoy taking my time in nature. And she's definitely one of those people that likes to take her time through everything. And I'm normally the person that needs to get things done immediately.
Okay.
And so we kind of talk about like what's it like to take time with things. We definitely spend a lot of time watching movies that aren't related to climbing, or
Good for you.
like we do typical couple stuff. We love going to see every superhero movie, honestly.
Hey, good for you, fellow geek.
Yeah,
I love to hear it.
recently went and saw Aquaman. She loves going into movie theaters. I know that's not a popular thing nowadays, but at least she's from Slovenia,
Oh,
and
so it's different.
it's different. The shopping mall and the movie theater scene is still a thing in Slovenia. It's changing with more online shopping, but people still like going to
Yeah.
actual physical shops and going into an actual movie theater. We make sure we hit the nostalgia button pretty hard. It's a lot of values. We really kind of keep it in tune with our values and what we actually value in each other, whether it's taking time to do things, or she loves to cook. So she'll cook and I'll go in and chop vegetables for her and keep an eye on things while she's getting other things prepared. So it's a lot of that type of stuff.
I'm glad to hear you guys are taking that
Yeah.
time because it's so critical to the success and everything
Yeah.
else. My last question is, what's ahead? What's next for you in your career? What's the goal you want to accomplish?
I have a couple. One I'm trying to get done by May is doing 3 V10s in 24 hours.
What is a V10?
A V10 is a boulder grade. It's like the first starting aspect of elite climber
Okay.
is climbing V10. And especially for paraclimbing, it's only been done a few times. And most of the time it's been done by amputees. It hasn't actually been done by someone born with their disability. So
Interesting. Okay.
I'm actively trying to complete that, but do not just one, but do 3 of them in a day.
Wow.
I'm working on trying to climb 514 by the end of November next year.
Which is?
It's a rope grade. The 514 I'm trying to climb is called Southern Comfort. Each route's given a name and a grade difficulty, and I'm really trying to focus in on those harder grades that other people born with their disability haven't accomplished. But I'm also trying to bring in other paraclimbers into things. I'm starting a film project this year called Limping Around the World,
Oh, I love it. What a great title.
where I'm visiting my friends that I've met through paraclimbing competitions around the world and visiting them at their home outdoor climbing area or their home crag, and telling a little bit of their story and a little bit of like what climbing has done for them, but also while we're enjoying each other's company and the other person's actual main climbing spot.
That sounds like a great project.
Yeah.
I think we'd all love to see that.
Yeah,
That's
it's a
great.
very big dream of mine to have this small mini series. So I can't get all of it shot all in 1 year. So I'm trying to do like 2 to 3 mini episodes a year over the
Yeah.
next 4 years.
Awesome. Well, I
So-
hope that happens. I hope we can all watch it. That would be fantastic. We should. Okay. So here's the part where I wrap up the conversation with action items, because someone listening to this might say, well, that's just Ben Mayforth. That's not me. I'm not able to do it. And what I want to do is I'm going to choose 3 actions that someone can take as a result of what they heard, because my goal is to help someone hear this and make your success story a part of their success story. So they may have thought of 10, 12 different things, but we're just going to highlight a few, and then I'd like you to add one at the end. Sound good?
Okay.
All right. So, boy, I had a big list, so it's hard for me to choose just 3, but I'm going to start with resourcefulness. From the very beginning of your story to everything that you're doing now, Ben, you are extremely resourceful. You use what you have and you maximize the heck out of it. And I want someone who might be thinking, oh, I don't have what I need. I don't have the money I need. I don't have the career I need. I don't have the connections. Instead, to say, what do I have? And make an inventory of those things and say, all of these things can be useful. They can help me succeed. So that would be the first suggested action item. The next, I would say, is find your community. I think a big turning point in your career came when you went to that festival and you started meeting with people who were accomplishing the same things or accomplishing the things you wanted to accomplish. And we all can be more successful when we start to associate with people who are trying to do what we want to do. Really powerful. So someone listening to this can pause and think, where can I go? Who can I reach out to who is accomplishing or wants to accomplish what I want to accomplish? And how can I build a relationship with that person? And then the last one that I'm going to say is, boy, we talked about it a lot, the power of positive rituals. And we're identifying a positive ritual as something that you are aware of, that you're conscious of, that you control rather than the ritual controlling you. So if there's something that you want to accomplish, something you repeat, come up with something small like the clap and smile to help ground yourself and remind yourself of the principles that you believe in, the values that you have so that you can succeed. I really enjoyed hearing that part about your success. All right, Ben, what would you add as one additional action that someone could take today?
Be consistent, especially with those positive rituals. Be consistent with your positive rituals. Try and do them every single day. And those positive rituals, even when you're not wanting to do something or when the intensity of your feelings is too much, if you are consistent in showing up and getting your work done, everything else will fall into place.
Yeah. And as it builds up over time, I've found that if you can do that for years, it really starts to pay off. It may not feel it right now, but it really pays off over time. Ben, I really want to encourage you. I've got a lot of people who work in Fortune 500 companies. I want them to consider you as a speaker. I think you would be a fantastic speaker at events to share your story. What's the best way for them to get in contact with you and to follow you?
You can follow my 2 Instagrams, Mayforth May LLC, or you could follow my main one, which I post more on. It's crushing_Benjamin.
Okay.
And if you want to reach out, you can email me at crushing.benjamin@gmail.com.
Okay, fantastic. Ben, thank you for being so generous with your time. We went longer than we expected. I'm so grateful that you were willing to do that.
No worries, Dave. I had a great time.
Yeah. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Remember, it's not about the knowledge you received. That's important. And it's not about the stories that you heard, which were great and entertaining. It's about the action that you take. So do something about what you heard from the lesson of Ben Mayforth, and then you can make his success story a part of your success story. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Dave Crenshaw Success Show, hosted by my dad, Dave Crenshaw, and produced by Invaluable Incorporated. Research and assistant production by Victoria Bedez. Sound editing by Mark Lammerjazy. Voiceover by me, Darcy Crenshaw. And the music is by Ryan Brady via Pond 5 Licensing. Please subscribe to the Dave Crenshaw Success Project on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you like to get your podcasts. If you have a suggestion for someone my dad might like to interview, please send it to guest@davecrenshaw.com. And please don't forget to leave us a 5-star review. See you next time.